especially for trauma victims, you're able to see your trauma not in the lens of your own eye. You're literally seeing it metaphorically through another lens.
You're listening to Why We Do What We Do. Welcome to Why We Do What We Do. I am your depressed host, Abraham.
And I am your wanting to try this host, Shane.
Great. You can tell, as always, we make these up right as we start. As soon as I start saying welcome to the podcast, I have to then think of what I'm going to be.
Yeah, we don't plan this.
If I prepared at all, it would sound a lot better. But anyway, we are a psychology podcast. Welcome if you're joining us for the first time. We often start a little smoother than that.
Yeah, it's true.
But we also just kind of fumble our way through all the time. So it is pretty par for the course. It'll show up here and there, you know?
Honestly, like, I think that's part of the fun of the show is like we have a script,
Absolutely.
But we also don't know where it's going to go. And that's the beauty of the tangents and also some of the fun that the patrons get to see when they get to see the video of us recording these episodes.
That's right. Speaking of which, if you would like to support us and you like what we do and you'd like to see, like, I get this sort of polished-ish product at the end, but what's the rough and ready side? What's the behind the scenes? Well, you can support us by joining us on Patreon and you get access to that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. You can also buy merch. You can leave us a rating and review, subscribe, adopt a highway in our name. I'll talk more about all of those things at the end of the episode. But before I even start, as I started saying, we're a psychology podcast. We talk all about the things of psychology and all of that sort of stuff. And we talk about mental health. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about with respect to mental health is a particular treatment that is a little bit controversial, gaining some momentum, I would say, and a way of supporting some people with mental health issues, specifically with depression and that sort of thing.
So we are going to dive into the world of ketamine, of all things.
Yes.
And kind of unpack what's going on with this. But before we do that, we should figure out what we're celebrating today and this week and this month.
Yeah, this episode drops on December 7th. And on December 7th, we have some holidays to celebrate, which is National Cotton Candy Day. Heck yes.
That's one of the things that you and I disagree on is cotton candy and mustard.
Oh, I'm not like overly enthusiastic about cotton candy, but I like it.
Okay.
So
what are your thoughts on cotton candy grapes?
I do like cotton candy grapes.
I've heard they're really good. I've never had one though.
Yeah, I like cotton candy.
Okay.
Grapes.
All right.
They taste good. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
The texture of cotton candy is kind of weird, so I can get that. It's sort of like if you were eating someone's hair.
And it melted.
And it was very sweet. Yeah, and then it melted in your mouth.
Yeah.
And so the texture
totally
at least is like someone's hair. Now you like cotton candy.
Yeah.
It is also National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. Mm-hmm. And related to that, I guess, International Civil Aviation Day. And for those of you who celebrate publicly or privately, it is Noam Chomsky's birthday, December 7th.
So yay for anarchy and nay for nativist language theory, I guess.
Sure.
I don't know how to celebrate him.
Nay for war and warlike things.
Yeah, nay for war. We don't like that.
Yeah, which I think sort of fits inside Noam Chomsky Day as well. So
yeah.
We also have December is the month of a few celebrations. We'll list a few during this episode and a few during the next episode. So it is National Gift of Sight Month, and I had to look into this because it had a little bit of an ableist sounding name, and it is meant to bring awareness to the importance of eye health. And so that's the Gift of Sight Month. I feel like calling it like Eye Health Awareness Month would be better, but that's what it's called, is Gift of Sight Month.
Yeah.
And it's meant to talk about eye health.
And both of us are wearing our glasses right now.
That's right. Our eyes are healthy behind a veneer of glass.
Yes.
It is also Worldwide Food Safety Service Month. And again, sort of related, National Pear Month. Mm-hmm. Pear, the fruit.
Pears. So great.
Yeah. Oh, pear. Okay. Let's talk about ketamine. Before we jump into this, though, this is a topic that is a little bit heavier, and we are going to be describing some aspects of mental health that include situations that people may find very difficult to listen to. So as a trigger warning, there are some discussions about suicide in this episode. If you feel like that is something you are uncomfortable or unwilling to listen to, you might want to sit this one out. We'll do our best to handle this as sensitively as we possibly can. So if you can listen through this, then I hope that you enjoy what we're able to bring to this one. As always, Although we are going to try and put a little bit of our own personality and humor to lighten the mood a little bit during this. We understand that this is a very serious topic, and the joking is not meant in any way to demean the seriousness of this topic, but just to bring some lightness to it, to help us sort of process this in a way that feels comfortable, at least for us. And hopefully it also resonates as it feeling somewhat comfortable for you. So I apologize, though, if any of what sounds like a joke comes across as insensitive. We'll try to avoid any malicious joking, if you will.
Another thing to kind of unpack within this, too, is we are talking about ketamine, which is a kind of taboo drug use. Like, it's known as a party drug, and we'll kind of unpack what that means in a little bit.
Good point.
But this is probably going to lead to some discussions around addiction and substance abuse and what that looks like. And that may also be triggering for some folks. So we want to just kind of give everybody a heads up that that may be coming up along the way as well.
Okay. We'll do our best to unpack the facts in a straightforward and scientific and accurate way as much as we possibly can. But let's go ahead and dive into it. I think with those out of the way, I feel like anything else we need to warn against before we start.
There is a Joe Rogan reference here, and that might be upsetting for people too.
That'll be upsetting for me.
Me as well.
But I'll power through.
Yeah, we'll get through it.
Okay. Now, the world has seen an unfortunate increase in mental health disorders, and I think it's important to try and continue to normalize and bring the conversation to discussing mental health so that we can destigmatize the discussions about mental health and mental health diagnoses and that sort of thing, so that people are willing to talk about it and they'll get the support that they need. And there has been, fortunately, an increase in the acceptance of mental health disorders as part of overall discussion about health, which has also led to an increase in the availability of treatments across various modalities. And so, as we mentioned, today we're talking about ketamine. And as you just pointed out, Shane, this is newer and very unconventional right now. That's still being developed in terms of the utility of this and the safety of it. And this is being used to treat certain mental health disorders, one of those being treatment-resistant depression, often called TRD. But also it's been applied for PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and suicidal ideation as well.
Yeah, so what we are going to try to do today is unpack what ketamine is, what it's used for, why ketamine is used for this, and we're going to answer the question, isn't that the rave drug from the 1990s?
Indeed.
And I had to be clear that it wasn't the 1890s because people are calling, like kids these days are calling like the 1900s, the 1900s. They're not just saying the 90s and the 80s and stuff. They're calling it the 1900s now.
It doesn't even get decades anymore.
No.
We're just into the 1900s. We're a full century of whatever happened during the 1900s.
You and I, my friend, we were born in the 1900s, according to kids these days.
Boo.
I mean, I'm okay with that. I like that it's nebulous and broad.
It's fair.
Like you were born in the 1900s when? I don't know, sometime in there.
At some point, maybe.
A lot happened in the 1900s, including myself.
Yeah. I could be wrong, but it feels like what changed between 1800 and 1900 was less severe than what changed between 1900 and 2000. Like the rate of change, like the aggressive rate of change across every spectrum of humanity and the globe is substantial over that century. And the century before it was like, yeah, a lot of stuff happened, sure. But I mean, 1900 to 2000 was like a completely different world.
Yeah, 1900s, more states, less cowboys, more moon. Wild times.
Right. Okay. I swear we're talking about ketamine. So let's dig into the background of this. We're not in ad break time yet, I don't think. No, we're not quite there. Okay. So we'll get to this. So ketamine is a Schedule III non-narcotic substance and is classified as dissociative, meaning it has properties of when consumed can create the euphoric experience of disassociation from oneself. Other classification of drugs you may be familiar with are stimulants in the similar classification. For example, cocaine. Interestingly, caffeine, depressants, for example, alcohol, psychedelics, for example, LSD and DMT. Thank you to Joe Rogan, because that has become quite the pop culture reference. And then other dissociatives that are in the same class as ketamine include nitrous oxide, going to the dentist sometimes. I've not had this at the dentist, but I believe it's still a thing.
Yes, it is. It's wild.
Oh, okay. Good to know. Probably definitely in Florida would be my
yeah.
Standard practice. Probably like the school nurse. It's got that.
Yeah. You get checked out for lice, and then you go also do the laughing gas.
Yeah, like you need some nitrous oxide for these lice.
Yeah,
I'll get rid of them. At least you won't care anymore.
Yeah.
The other one is whippets, and then methoxetamine.
Methoxetamine.
MXE.
Methoxetamine.
That was way better. Yeah, I like yours.
Yeah.
MXE.
Yeah. The legal use of ketamine started in the 1970s in the United States and is commonly used as an injectable, short-acting anesthetic used in both animal and human medicine. So its chemical structure, ketamine, which is specifically 2-chlorophenyl 2-methylamino cyclohexanone. That
was beautiful. That was so good. I want to keep that in. It was so good.
That's as close as I'm going to get. Ketamine is a phencyclidine PCP derivative. So, just think Chris Tucker in Friday in a chicken coop. Like, that's kind of what this is like and what's going on with folks.
So that was your chemistry 101 mixed with pop culture.
I want a ribbon for that, getting through that sentence.
You deserve a ribbon. I think there should be ones in the mail.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Okay, so ketamine is a relatively safe drug to use. So many caveats on that. But specifically in the context of a medical setting, it has, of course, gained popularity for and in use recreationally instead. If you're thinking to yourself that this sounds familiar, and many people probably are, it's because it is more widely known as a club drug, mostly in the sort of quote unquote rave scene, if you will, often called Special K. And its effects are described as being in a K hole. So when using ketamine, you might describe someone who's using it as being in a K hole, or describe yourself if you're using it as being in a K-hole, that sort of thing.
Also, if you are familiar with the term K-hole, there's a NoFX song called Kids of the K-hole, and it's a great song, so you should go listen to that. Now, recreational users of this drug report a euphoric experience that causes distortions in sights and sounds, and oftentimes they will have an out-of-body experience, which is dissociation, that may or may not cause hallucinations, and that's kind of another effect that you might see here.
Now, it apparently was originally used for its sedative effects as well, and so users often snort this drug. And apparently the high lasts about 60 to 90 minutes. I have recreationally used some drugs in my life, but I've never used ketamine. Do you have any experience with this, or you want to share?
No, I was a straight edge kid for a long time, so like I never had this experience. The drugs I have used recreationally were not this strong.
Okay, you were just using the aspirin.
Yeah, just aspirin and the devil's lettuce mostly.
Okay.
Now, later we're going to discuss how the out-of-body experience, which is that dissociation piece, is specifically an advantageous side effect for its use in processing trauma for people with PTSD. However, research has demonstrated that dissociation is not necessarily needed for successful treatment outcomes, and we're gonna unpack all that in a little bit.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and apologize. Don't run away. A little bit more chemistry coming your way. And then once you've had a moment to process that, then we'll give you some space. So ketamine is made up of two enantiomers. I didn't look up how to pronounce this. Enantiomers. Let's call it that.
Enantiomers? Enantiomers. Sure.
Yeah.
We're chemists.
Something of that nature. It's made up of two things. One of them is S-ketamine and the other is R-ketamine. This form is also called the racemic ketamine. And so an enantiomer are two mirror images that are similar but not identical. And that's actually really important in the structure of these chemicals, oftentimes the layout of the sort of molecules in there. You can think about it as your left and right hand. Again, they're very similar, but they're not completely identical. And they cannot actually be superimposed on each other, but they do instead create a mirror image, right? So you can't necessarily put your right hand over your left hand and have it look exactly the same because your thumbs are going different directions.
Right.
But they're mostly mirror images of one another for the most part. And so when talking about ketamine on the molecular level and looking in sort of the literature, you'll hear them describe either S-ketamine or R-ketamine, described as mirror image molecules of each other due to that physical makeup. And that will help guide future conversations in its on-label and off-label use, because we'll start talking about S-ketamine and how it's been regulated in the United States.
Absolutely. So now that we have left chemistry class and you have turned off your Bunsen burners and stopped staring at your periodic table, we're going to take a quick break so you can absorb that information, and we will return to talk about the FDA.
All right, we just had put you in a K-hole of chemistry, and now we're going to get out of that and talk about the Federal Drug Administration.
Yeah, just spicy content here. Now, in 2019, the FDA, the Federal Drug Administration, approved the use of Spravato, which is a concentrated mirror image molecule of ketamine called esketamine. Esketamine. I mean, when I read Spravato, that's what I mean. Spravato, esketamine.
Yeah.
Like I do that. Now, this is S-ketamine. ketamine. Essentially, it's the one side of that ketamine enantiomer.
Yeah. So Spravato, specifically this drug application, this was designed as a nasal spray. You can take this. It's actually directly marketed as treatment in the use of treatment-resistant depression. And again, note that S-ketamine, trade name Spravato, otherwise known as the S form of ketamine, is then in fact, ipso facto, if you will, the FDA-approved treatment for treatment-resistant depression. But ketamine itself is not. And it's a really important distinction to make, that the S-ketamine, that sort of mirror molecule, one side of it, it has been approved, but ketamine by itself has not been approved by the FDA.
And this is actually something that one day we'll have to tackle big pharma, and we'll do that thing. But like, one of the things that's really interesting about working in like drug treatments is that a lot of times the drugs that people are afraid of are legal and different dosages are legal. I mean, methamphetamine is legal in treatment for like nutrition and dietary issues. Like, it's used to treat obesity in like legal doses in certain ways, but people know meth is what people know. So like, it's important to kind of know how these things happen, and like that there are these levels of these drugs that do exist. So now, due to S-ketamine's high concentration, which allows for lower doses, its sedative effects limit its current use of this modality of the intranasal spray to be under a medical professional in an office setting. So Spravato is not dispensed for at-home use at this time. So you have to go to a doctor's office to get the spray. You can't just carry around a nose spray with you.
I'm wondering at this point, and I imagine many of our listeners are too, how did anyone discover that this drug, whatever it is, that is sort of been known recreationally, but how did the medical community discover that this could be used to treat these specific types of disorders? Well, in the 1970s, researchers first noticed that ketamine did show this sort of antidepressant-like effect in animal behavior in some of the research there.
Yeah, and now since the 1970s, recreational users of ketamine reported a decrease in depressive symptoms with the use of ketamine, while typical treatments like Prozac or Lexapro, all those did not really seem to have an effect. And so research into this drug did not move forward due to it being an illicit drug, which is interesting because in the 70s, there was all kinds of other things. Like if you want to look up like MK Ultra and stuff, that's a whole thing where they were testing acid for like war tools and stuff. But anyway, that's a different thing. So, but we have seen this shift before. So when you think about the medicinal and even the recreational use of marijuana throughout the U.S., if you're lucky to live in those states, Georgia, for the person who wrote these notes behind the eight ball a little bit, pun intended, it begs the question of what other drugs, controlled or not, should have medicinal or impactful results, like psilocybin. That's fair, because there are studies and people are starting to study psilocybin and LSD and these other kind of drugs to treat mental health challenges that are going on.
Now, our writer Jess helped put these notes together, and she found the first article that she has listed here that she reports as being the first randomized controlled trial to look at R and S-ketamine was a 2000 study. And in this study, ketamine showed rapid acting and sustained antidepressant effects for patients with depression. And then the study was replicated by Zarat and colleagues in 2006 as well. So since there has been a multitude of studies that have confirmed the use of R-S-ketamine for treatment-resistant depression for patients with major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder, and suicidal ideation, there's now more support coming online in the research community for application of ketamine to these populations.
So Johnny was diagnosed with bipolar disorder about 2 years ago.
This is Sarah, who is the mother of a child who is receiving ketamine for treatment. And she joined us to talk about her experiences using ketamine for her son. And their names have been changed to protect their identities.
You know, we tried the traditional drugs, Prozac, some other antidepressants, and it just wasn't really working for him. A lot of side effects. He's a young teenager, and some of the side effects that you can have are a little bit unwanted, specifically the sexual side effects, which I was really grateful that he was able to kind of talk to me about those things, but also just like feeling numb. He's a very creative individual, and he just was like, I feel numb. I don't like it. So
what were the sexual side effects?
Yeah, just erectile dysfunction. I mean, he was like 16 at this time. So his words were, it just doesn't work. So I was like, that's a pretty important aspect of a 16-year-old's life, any, person's life.
So it's starting to grow in its research body. It's starting to see an effect. And now we kind of have to look at, we know the literature is there to kind of show this effect, but how is this administered and how is this monitored by clinicians? Because this seems like a wild thing if you're not familiar with it.
Yeah, and we just talked about that there's the nasal spray for the S-ketamine, but there's other administration routes that include intravenous, so stick a needle in the arm sort of thing, into the vein, might be in the toe or wherever you want, I guess. Intramuscular, so a little bit deeper tissue, and then there is now an orally administered version of this available.
Yeah. Now, intravenous and intramuscular modalities of treatment are often costly, not covered by insurance, and must be done within the confines of a medical setting, thus leaving many people with the inability to access those types of services. So while some insurance companies are out there like Blue Cross Blue Shield, they have actually started covering the treatment. It is still fairly cost prohibitive to a lot of people. So like this does exist and they've shown an effect, but people can't really access it very well.
Yeah, the insurance is just it's not going to probably willingly move there unless there's pressure to do so from some regulating body, or unless people start jumping ship and moving to insurance carriers that do offer that kind of support. I don't see a lot of people who make that kind of jump, but it does happen sometimes. So it's possible that would be a motivating factor for some insurance companies.
Yeah.
But anyway, visits are usually just a few hours to ensure that, they have to sort of stay there to ensure that the drug has worn off. But as we said, the effects can last up to 90 minutes, sometimes as short as 45 minutes. It does depend on the person, on the dose, that sort of thing.
Yeah, if you ever get a chance to see Neil Brennan's 3 Mics, he talks about going through this. He's a stand-up comedian that wrote with Dave Chappelle, and he talks about having really significant depression and going and getting this. And he's basically like, I go to this doctor's office and I trip my face off for like an hour and a half. And then he talked about it worked pretty well for a little bit. So it's a pretty interesting anecdotal report. So, yeah,
and that is actually an important point to make here, and probably a few more times throughout this discussion, is the point is not that people who have depression are high all the time. When they take these treatments, it's usually like, take this, go live your life, come back at regular intervals and take it until the effects have worn off. And so they're actually out in the world not on ketamine.
Yeah.
They come and take it as like a temporary 90-minute treatment effect.
Right.
And then that seems to, the effects of that on with respect to their depression appears to linger as they go out into the world, which is great for them.
Yeah. And you're seeing that particular like effect. The research is showing, or like the people are trying to research this, and it's promising at least that this is happening with a lot of different psychedelics too. So like this is not just like this is a thing that's kind of been like a phenomenon that's occurring across multiple drugs, not just ketamine. So it's worth talking about that. Now, the oral administration is becoming more popular. As far as the cheaper dosages go, one psychiatrist charges $250 a month for his services, and it's about $100 with shipping for the ketamine per month. So $350 per month is way cheaper than the $1,500 per injection that somebody might receive. And this cheaper oral option includes 10 ketamine troches, which we're going to talk about in a second. Troches. Is that how you say it? Troches.
It kind of looked like troches to me.
Yeah. Troches is
it could be troches, but I'm guessing troches.
Troches or troches. It's Troches.
Yeah.
And we're going to explain that in a minute. And one of these is taken every 3 days.
And it actually doesn't need to be taken in a clinical setting. So most often it's compounded into a troche, which is what I'm going to call it now. And so, as I said, we were going to describe this. We fumbled our way through pronouncing it, but we can talk about it at least. It's essentially a small lozenge, and that you don't swallow. Okay. Instead, you just place it under your tongue or between your cheek and gum line. And this particular route of administration allows a steadier, quicker, more consistent delivery of the medication. It's not entered into the bloodstream all at once, so you don't have like a big rush of it, therefore decreasing the spikes in those possible side effects. And it typically takes about 30 minutes to dissolve. So assuming you take it in that way, you get sort of it's not just a big hit of it, it's sort of a time release dose, if you will, that allows it to sort of do its thing without having that kind of side effect that you would get by taking a more direct, like straight into the bloodstream hit of that same dose.
Right, absolutely. Also, it's pronounced troche, so we were both wrong.
Oh, a troche. A troches. That's a fun name. Oddly spelled version of it.
Yeah, troches. So this is not meant to be a treatment that you do forever, like a lot of antidepressants are. You typically get off it pretty quickly. It's often given, regardless of the route, more frequently at first and then faded out over time to a maintenance dose, which is another benefit of its use. And it's highly recommended to be combined with therapy, like some type of DBT or CBT, or if you're not familiar with those, dialectical behavior therapy or cognitive behavior therapy. But I think if you're listening to the show, you're probably familiar with those terms.
You said he has like a lozenge with the ketamine. And this isn't S-ketamine. This is just ketamine, right?
This is the S-ketamine.
Oh, this is S-ketamine.
So, yeah,
okay.
This is S-ketamine.
In the form of a troche.
Okay. It's from a troche. We found out.
Is that how you say it?
Yes.
Apparently. We said it like 5 different ways before before Shane just Googled it. So there are none of those euphoric dissociative effects of the lozenge itself. Is that correct?
So you build a tolerance to it. So at first, yes. And the thing that's interesting about it is that you don't have to disassociate to reap the benefits of ketamine. But when you do, it actually helps therapeutically because you're able to see especially for trauma victims, you're able to see your trauma not in the lens of your own eye. You're literally seeing it metaphorically through another lens.
So there are some other benefits that are useful to discuss with using ketamine over other traditional treatments, such as Zoloft or Prozac or other antidepressants. We've mentioned a few up to this point. And one of them is the fact that this is, as we mentioned, very fast acting. So it's quick. It's a couple hours right away versus a couple of weeks. Most antidepressants can take many weeks of continued use to show those therapeutic effects. And now we're getting these many randomized control trials that are start to show rapid decrease in those symptoms of depression that we've talked about, suicidal ideation, the other depressive symptoms, those sorts of things within hours of the treatment of ketamine, which is really important. I mean, if you consider the time frame, the frame of that, being able to rapidly decrease that suicidal ideation instead of having to wait, hopefully in a couple of weeks, you'll stop feeling this way, which could be risky. There's a really important implication for those individuals and their families who are suffering from the mental illness, particularly with respect to with their depressive symptoms, including suicidal ideation and or attempts and that sort of thing.
So ended up coming off the antidepressants, even though, that wasn't really what I wanted at the time.
What had you guys decide to seek a diagnosis in the first place? My
brother's bipolar. He's actually not bipolar. He actually has borderline personality disorder and PTSD, which I'll get to that when the hospitalization. But I had kind of picked up on some stuff when he was going through puberty. I just didn't think that things were 100% normal. He would have a lot of depressive episodes, a lot of panic attacks, and it just kind of started getting more and more. And, being in a similar field, I guess, I just was like, something's not right. So I sought an evaluation, got the bipolar and the generalized anxiety disorder in early 2021. And so he had just turned 16 at this time. He was very receptive to therapy, but the drugs he hated them. I mean, it was a very big point of contention between us because I told him that I wasn't going to shove meds down his throat, at 16, but the panic attacks and the depressive episodes and the outbursts, he was had a lot of episodes that were just very rage, just pure rage. And then he would be crying the next minute, having a panic attack, me cuddling him in my arms. So it was just, it was hard, but I knew that, he was going to resent me if I made him take meds every day, which how are you going to make a 16-year-old take meds every day?
Right. And so when we talk about the kind of using this treatment and what it looks like, the question always comes up, is it safe? And what are the risks? A strong, in-episode recommend is going to read Drug Use for Grown-Ups by Dr. Carl Hart, because this is one of the things he talks about. When used as directed, these drugs are very safe. Most drugs are very safe when they are used as directed. The problem is not the drug. The problem is the overdose of the drug and stuff like that. Now, the side effects of ketamine typically include sedation, dizziness, headaches, high blood pressure, perceptual disturbances, like time appearing to speed up or slow down, colors, textures, noises that seem especially stimulating, blurry vision, and dissociation. Pretty much all the ones that you see in the commercials.
That's right. Yeah. Side effects include.
Yeah.
And this can be very dangerous and, of course, fatal if mixed with alcohol. That's true of life
Yeah.
and everything in life that happens. And so speaking of time speeding up or slowing down, we're going to make time come to an absolute screeching halt while we play some ads.
So ketamine does have a high potential for abuse, and one of the reasons it's given under medical care is because of this high potential. But when taken orally under that S-ketamine classification that we talked about, the psychoactive component that recreational users seek will dissipate with use. And it's one of the reasons why S-ketamine is used safely at home. It's because the intensity of the drug is not nearly as strong, but still has the properties to aid in decreasing depressive states and kind of help with those effects that you're seeking when you're using this from the mental health perspective. Now, as we mentioned before, using S-ketamine can still cause dissociation, but not nearly as intensely as R-ketamine and R-S-ketamine. So this makes it an ideal alternative for home use. You're not going to be tripping like crazy like you would if you were receiving the other types of ketamine. And this actually increases access and availability to prescribed users. It makes it so that people can access it in a regular fashion. They can access it more regularly than they would if they had to go get the injections. Right.
And although people may build a tolerance to this over time, and they're actually maybe likely to, the dose used for depression with S-ketamine or any of these, it looks like, is much lower than given when using an anesthetic. Therefore, it decreases some of those potential side effects. Although, again, more research is needed for really understanding the long-term use of the drug, how steeply the effects of it wear off with sort of building tolerance and that sort of thing. So we're at early stages of this as used for treatment, but it does seem promising.
Yeah. So we've kind of talked about how it's administered. We talk about kind of what the drug is and some of the things about what it does and some of its effects, but we should have a conversation about the actual experiences. So what are those experiences of people who have legally been prescribed this type of drug for use? Like, I mean, let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah. We have this quote here: blasted to the cosmos and entered the event horizon of a black hole.
That sounds stressful.
It does sound very stressful. I don't think I would want to experience that. So this is one user's description of this, but instead of being overcome with fear and panic, as I would be, I feel like in that situation, particularly if it actually happened, this user was washed over by waves of awe and a feeling of something beyond life as we know it, saying, quote, "I sound like a doting hippie, but I realize that nothing else matters except for love and gratitude," end quote. And so I also described it as being very peaceful, serene, beautiful, tranquil, all of those sort of things. And then another user compared her intranasal ketamine treatments as being inside a lava lamp, which is fun, like the little thing that floats around, she said. She said, "I felt great, better than I ever had in my whole life. This was the person I'd always wanted to be, but couldn't because I was so mentally ill," end quote. So apparently those are, I think, the dissociative effects that they're describing with respect to the sort of immediate jump of experience in ketamine.
It sounds like that episode of The Simpsons where Mr. Burns is getting treatment and he's also irradiated and they think he's an alien. And he's like, "I come with love." And he's like glowing, walking in the woods. Like, that's what that sounds like. I mean, which sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I say, like, just that effect itself sounds like it would probably be pretty great to experience, but these are folks that are really struggling, and this is like, I feel normal for the first time in my entire life.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty powerful stuff.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of the flow. He had tried a couple, and then we decided just, it is what it is. Like, is this really what's going to happen? We tried different therapists. And really that kind of went on for about, I want to say a good year of just it being really bad. Just
and that,
a lot
was
of
with or without the drugs?
Without. He really was only on drugs for about 2 months, maybe.
Okay. That was trying therapy. It wasn't really doing anything.
Yeah. And I'm not really convinced he had the right therapist at the time. He went to a talk therapist, which is great. But the therapist that he goes to now, actually, it's dialectical behavioral therapy, which is really good for people with borderline personality disorder.
Now, there are many benefits to the use of ketamine over the use of other psychotropic drugs. specifically used for depression, anxiety, or PTSD, like Zoloft, Lexapro, or Xanax. Again, we talked about this before, but it's short-acting, doesn't have a lot of unwanted side effects like weight gain, decreased sex drive, or erectile dysfunction in males, feeling numb, or not like themselves, the folks that are taking it, among a myriad of other ones. And so these are common reasons why people don't like taking the typical psychotropic drugs, because there are these side effects that make them feel less than. I mean, my daughter took risperidone for a while and was like, just felt like everything was dull. She would describe that. She's like, everything just feels dull, like nothing, everything's got soft edges.
Wow.
And many people stop taking the drugs. She's not taking it anymore. And many people stop taking those drugs because of those side effects, because it's just not, it just, everything is, it's like, while she was doing better, it wasn't working for her. Like,
wow.
The quality of life was just like, everything was like a shade of gray, you know?
Got it.
This past August is really when everything kind of came to a head.
Okay.
Things were just getting progressively worse. We actually had taken to the psychiatrist again, a new psychiatrist that he really, really liked. And we had kind of started talking about different things. And then he ended up having an attempt and voluntarily put himself in a mental institution, that behavioral health center, which
So
I was,
been, 17 at the time?
yeah.
Okay.
So this was just August, like 2022, just a couple months ago. And I was really grateful that he came to me. He had a safety plan. Like, who do you go to when you're having these thoughts? Grateful that it was a failed attempt and that he felt comfortable talking to us. And so we took him to the hospital. He was admitted to a mental health center. And there really is when everything changed, because I remember the day the psychiatrist called me and they were like, we've evaluated your son. And I remember him saying, it says in the DSM-5 that I can't diagnose your son with borderline personality disorder till he's 18. But I'm telling you right now that is what he has. And everything changed. Everything opened up, because Johnny, I don't know, he never really felt like he was bipolar. He cycled really rapidly. So we would have those like manic episodes. You would have the depressed episodes, but they would cycle so quickly. It wasn't like those weeks. And the psychologist at the time had told me that it was different in teenagers, that they could rapidly cycle. So after he was released, he decided that he would try meds again. So he went on meds. He went on, Zoloft. And another medication that they actually use in Vietnam vets to help with flashbacks. I forget what it's called off the top of my head. It's actually a blood pressure medication, because he does have some PTSD from some things. He unfortunately had some trauma, some sexual trauma that we didn't find out about until about 6 months ago as well, which just compounded everything. So he decided to go on meds, and things were amazing. Like, Johnny was so happy. Things were really great.
Did that take the sort of 2 weeks of continuous use before you saw that? Okay.
Yeah, for sure. But once again, the side effects. He just was like, it's the same. I'm not happy. I'm not able to be creative. He still was having the sexual side effects. Described. Yeah, he just said he was numb. I mean, he's a very, very intelligent, creative, musical kid. Just so creative. And he's like, I'm just not myself. I don't want to be stifled. So then, I kind of put my hands up again. I was just like, well, what am I supposed to do? Well, here I've got this, like, he's got peace. It wasn't just about me. Like, I see that he's more at peace, but yet he's not 100% happy. And then one of his friends actually told him about the ketamine. And he had already he's a kid that researches a lot. So he had been kind of talking about it for a while, but I didn't really think it was going to be possible. It's really expensive. Like $1,500 an injection is what we were getting. Yeah. The clinic that he was actually at for his therapy did ketamine treatments, but it was $1,500 an injection. And I was $2,000 for like the evaluation. I was like, oh my God, this is so much. So fast forward, his friend told about a doctor who does telehealth medicine that, he's a psychiatrist. He has a whole team of people, and he will evaluate you, look over your medical records, and essentially will mail you. It's compounded. So Johnny gets these little lozenges in the mail. It's compounded at our pharmacy. It comes to about $75 to $100 a month for these.
Much better than 1,500.
Yes.
Per dose.
And so, yeah, that's kind of how we came to it. So, yeah, I mean,
what was the difference when he started taking ketamine?
Yeah, so he had still dealt with a lot of suicidal ideation. I mean, honestly, that was my biggest concern. Like, not that I wasn't concerned that he was depressed, but he just said that I I remember going to the doctor and him being like, I don't have any. And I don't remember the last time that was something that he had said.
Wow.
Just the other day, I was actually thinking about this example. Johnny was so angry all the time and just so depressed. He was either up or down and, just kind of despondent at times. And the other day, just like 2 nights ago, I made, I guess, a good dinner. And he was like, thanks for cooking. I really appreciate it. It was a really good dinner. Like, just something so small like that, he would have never, said. And I know it's like, yeah, he's a 17-year-old teenage boy, but like, just like little things like that, or like, hey, Mom, don't worry about doing my laundry. I really want to try to do it because I know I'm going to be moving out in a year and I want to make sure I know how to do my own laundry. I'm like, oh, wow, okay, who is this kid? I really, like, when I said I got my kid back, I really can just see it like in his face. Like, he smiles, he jokes, he laughs. Family gatherings, he would just completely shut himself out in the other room. Does not do more than like 3 people. He's laughing with family. Thanksgiving was probably, I guess, the first holiday that was really, really nice because it just, he could be part of the family. And I probably could go on about it, but it really just was like, it's like he's just been lifted off of this depressive state that he was in.
And none of those same side effects?
Nope.
It sounds like not only that there were none of those previous side effects, but like the benefits are even so much greater. So like he's got this really powerful, really effective thing, no side effects, an improved quality of life. Like, I mean, it sounds like all of these things are happening around the situation. And I mean, how are you feeling with that? I mean, just having all of that. I mean, besides the fact that you're feeling like I've got my kid back, but how does that feel from like a stress level, from like a worry level, from like all that? Because as a parent who has a child who has had attempts, it's always there. But I'm just kind of curious, like having this experience where it's totally different than what you had before. I mean, how are you feeling now?
Yeah, so I actually had to cut back my blood pressure medication because my blood pressure is so much better than it was. Like, that's a fact. Wow. That's how much stress it was causing me. I mean, I cannot tell you how many, like, I constantly worrying, like just all the time, literally going up to his room sometimes at 3:00 in the morning just to make sure he was still there or still alive because I was so fearful that he was going to do something. Yeah, it is like a world of a difference. And I think too, one of the reasons I want to get this information out here is I feel like I'm pretty open-minded, especially to unconventional methods and use of drugs. Like you said, like it's not the drug, it's how you use it. Right. And I think that's an important thing because I imagine that there may be some hesitation with people. And that's why I want to get it out there and want more research done and talk about these things because this has literally saved my child's life. And the relationships he has with me, the relationship he has with his dad, his brother. I mean, I have a younger son who's 14 that has witnessed all of this.
Yeah.
Who actually came up to me a couple weeks ago and asked me if he was going to have to go through what Johnny went through. Like, that was a moment that I was like, wow, like he has seen all this, So it's been huge for our family. I mean, huge, literally life-changing for us.
Wow.
And so he said that he did at first. They actually just upped his dose this last month because he was getting a little bit more resistant, and they start him off at a super low dose. And what's interesting is at first when he was doing this, I think this is really interesting. He would go up to his room, and it's funny because there's like this whole protocol that he's supposed to follow, and someone's supposed to be home, and he takes anti-nausea medication because it can make you sick. And now he actually, like the other day, he just like came downstairs and was like, oh yeah, I took my ketamine. I was like, oh. And he's like walking through the kitchen and is like huge smile on his face. And he's like he's not wobbly, but you can tell I'm like, oh, cool, bud. And he was just like wanting to talk. And I was like, okay, cool, dude, let's talk. Like, okay.
Yeah.
So that was the first time I'd actually seen him on it. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Cool. Thank you so much to Sarah and her son for being willing to join us and share their experiences in using ketamine as a treatment. And that's really important in thinking about the reasons that people might choose to select one drug over another, or why a pharmacist might prescribe one drug over another, is thinking about what the quality of life that you're going to have afterward. And another advantage that so far it seems like is the case is that you don't have to take ketamine forever. You don't have to take it every day, and it can be tapered off, with prescription and recommendations of a therapist. So it seems like it's got a pretty good potential to be a temporary treatment that helps get people on track, and then they don't have to rely on it indefinitely. That seems to be the hope, and that seems to be where people are going. But I think a lot of people kind of wonder, why does this work? Like, what is going on? Why is ketamine even, like, how could this possibly be the case that ketamine works?
Yeah, and my favorite answer, and this is to shock everybody, this is kind of a standard answer for researchers that work in this space. A lot of them will say, we don't know.
Yeah.
This happens a lot. I mean, this happens way more than people realize when it comes to like any sort of like medical procedures and stuff like that. People are like, I don't know. Well, we know it works, but we have no idea the mechanism by which it works. And so that's kind of true for ketamine, right?
I had to take a pharmacology class in grad school, and I remember the person who taught the class was a pharmacist, and specifically said, like, we don't really know. We know that it works. Not totally sure how. For a lot of drugs. For like quite a few. Now, the thing is it's not entirely clear how ketamine rapidly eases depression, but researchers know ketamine has different brain targets than standard antidepressants, which would mean that it's going to have different effects on different parts of the brain. And that includes boosting activity in a chemical called glutamate, which helps brain cells communicate with each other. So it allows them to communicate more rapidly or communicate in different ways. Mm-hmm. And so studies also suggest ketamine fosters the regrowth of synapses, or those connections among brain cells that can be depleted in people with long-standing depression. So it's almost got like a reparative effect. And that's exactly why that ketamine might work, is that those growth and changes of synapses, those aren't something that other medications are likely to help with or support in that growth and that the changing of synapses. And so people with treatment-resistant depression, that might be the reason that their depression is treatment-resistant, is because they need that kind of support. And ketamine does seem to offer that right now.
Yeah. I mean, another part of this too is it does help people become more receptive to therapy. They're able to see things for like those like past traumas and all that from a different perspective. And they're kind of able to kind of like, work through or kind of conceptualize those scenarios in a different way than they would if they were not on ketamine, and allows them to process differently. And this can also occur while on the drug, but also afterwards. And that's the thing that's kind of interesting. It's like once the drug wears off, they can still do this thing.
And so these are some pretty big implications, that the drug might not only be decreasing symptoms, but also possibly doing some repair of the brain. That could be really significant if that turns out to be that there is more good than there is harm, that there is more benefit than there is drawback. All of that sort of stuff would definitely make this a drug that a lot of people will be very interested in using to support their mental health issues, such as depression and PTSD and other things that we've described, and even maybe beyond those.
Yeah, I think that's an important discussion that's not being had in many other circles. Like, you're not hearing that with Seroquel. Like, nobody is taking Haldol and going, "Oh, this is doing good for the brain." Everybody's going, "Ooh," when that comes up,
Right. Yeah. So we've got some other sort of fun stuff to unpack here to talk about, just understanding sort of where this is going and that sort of thing. And as we described, over the last decade, there has been a pretty significant increase in clinical application of this. So a study in 2022 by Hull and colleagues completed this experiment to test the effects of home ketamine-assisted therapy, or KAT, ketamine-assisted therapy.
Yeah.
They had 1,247 patients who received that oral ketamine and then had remote monitoring over about a month, a 4-week period. And the patients completed 2 assessments, one that assessed for depression and one for anxiety. So most patients had a 50% or greater improvement in their scores. So about 62% of them did. So 50% or greater, meaning the lower the better. So their scores of depressive symptoms sort of dropped, meaning so that was a significant change.
Right.
Only 4 people dropped out of the study due to the side effects or due to clinician disqualification. And then 2 more did report some adverse side effects. And so this is one of the largest studies on ketamine, especially for home use, showing some effectiveness in decreasing depressive and anxiety symptoms.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I mean, so you said 4 people dropped out, 2 people were disqualified, or 2 more left because of adverse effects. So you really only lost 6 people out of 1,247 people.
Yeah,
that's a pretty large end, and that's not a very high attrition rate. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's not too bad for sure.
Now, if you're wondering, I mean, I'm kind of wondering, like, where do I get this? Where do I score this? Just to kind of cover ourselves and talk about this a little bit, we would be remiss if we to kind of ignore the fact that there are high rates of abuse, and this drug has a history of high rates of abuse. But in this particular episode, we're exploring the atypical but promising uses of this drug in the mental health world, the science behind it, and how it can greatly impact the quality of life of people who use it responsibly under strict guidance and the care of trained medical professionals. We are not talking about recreational use here. We're talking about access under care and prescription and for certain reasons under the appropriate dose. I mean, these are very particular circumstances in which somebody's getting this drug.
You said it exactly. We're not medical doctors. We're not advising anyone on the use of these drugs. Do not take street versions of ketamine or other illegal drugs to treat mental illness. Speak to a doctor before you make any decisions about your treatment in that way. If you're in crisis, call 988. This is the new suicide hotline number that just rolled out this year. You can speak to someone by calling 988. That's all you have to do. 988, press call. You can talk to somebody.
Yeah.
All right. Let's rapid fire through some sort of interesting tidbits. If you just want to, let's take these one at a time. Ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So over 300 million people suffer from depression. Approximately a third of those have that treatment-resistant form we've described, characterized as 2 failed attempts of medical treatment.
Now, suicide rates rose substantially between 1999 and 2016, increasing by 30% in 25 states. And the need for more effective, fast-acting treatment is desperately needed.
In the study at ketamine clinics in Virginia, researchers found an 85% decrease in suicidal ideations. They did, however, acknowledge that there is no system to track other adverse effects and side effects among those ketamine patients.
Now, a Utah-based clinic saw 20,000 patients in 2020. The next year, they saw 65,000 patients, which was a 225% increase in demand for ketamine.
A psychiatrist in North Carolina went from seeing 2 patients a week to 10 patients a day within a 6-month period. And I think these, again, are patients looking for ketamine.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there are ketamine clinics popping up everywhere. Just do a simple Google search. There are, I think, 8 or 9 in Florida.
Okay. Quick myth to bust. Ketamine is an opioid. Nope. It is not an opioid. This is a common misconception.
Nope, it is not. Now, any other type of ketamine other than Spravato, the nasal spray, is considered an off-label use of the drug.
Very good. All right. There's a whole timeline thing. We'll put that in the notes for people who want to join us on Patreon. But otherwise, I think we can hit some take-home points, which is one is that so far the research seems to suggest that ketamine as an intervention, particularly S-ketamine, it seems to be where we're at right now, is safe and can be effective for people with pretty serious depression, potentially PTSD, potentially anxiety, and that suicidal ideation.
Research has only really occurred within the last 20 years, so we don't have a lot on this. We need more research on it, and it's desperately needed because treatment-resistant depression can be really severe and deadly for some folks.
Okay, so understanding that a lot of people have probably asking, why is this seem like very few people are using it? I think there's a few things to unpack there. The research is very new. It's only 20 years at best, and most of that's starting to come online kind of the last 10. It's got a bad reputation because it has been associated with a party drug. It's had a lot of street use. It's still considered a controlled substance. And so we just need more data and more research for this to start being more widely accepted and to determine what the parameters are. Like, we need to know when this doesn't work, when it's counter recommended.
Yeah. Now, one psychiatrist said that ketamine treatment right now is like the wild, wild west. And so essentially what that means is that it's kind of an open world. We don't really know what's going on. Yep. There's a lot of research that's needed. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered. More studies need to be done. More oversight is needed. But we're talking about life or death. And I think that's an important thing to consider is if this is something that could save people's lives, then it's worth looking at.
Agreed. Well, I think that's all that we have. Do you have anything else before we get to some recommendations?
Nope, not tonight.
All right, before we do some recommendations, I do have something, and it is ads.
Recommendations.
I'll go first because mine is very fast. I discovered that the gigantic, super well-known yogurt brand that you can find everywhere, Yoplait, has a dairy-free, I think this is brand new, but I just discovered it, so for me it's new. So Yoplait now has a dairy-free yogurt. And so for those of you following a vegan diet or otherwise dairy-free diet, this is available, and it is so good. Such a strong recommend. I absolutely loved it. I'm like, wow, I only picked up a few of these because I was just going to try it, and I'm 100% going back to the store to get more. Yoplait dairy-free yogurt, fantastic.
I love that. I'm so happy that you have that.
Yeah.
All right. My recommendation is a show. I am a super Star Wars nerd, and I will consume anything and all things that are Star Wars. And so when Andor came out, I was all in because it was, one, not a story about the Skywalker family.
Right.
Everyone's getting real sick of that family. It's like a bunch of spoiled brats that are ruining it for everyone. It was about Andor. It was about Cassian Andor, who was like one of the coolest characters to come out of Rogue One. And so it's 12 episodes. I have not seen the last 2 yet, but so far you've got Stellan Skarsgård is in it, and he's incredible in it. You've got Andy Serkis, who's in it, who is also incredible in it.
Yep.
I mean, just the cast is fantastic, and it's just so good. It's beautiful. You get to explore the galaxy. You get to see all kinds of sketchy stuff. It's really, really great, and I'm like, it's a strong recommend for me. For sure.
It does feel like one of the things that has expanded the Star Wars universe in a more, I think, user-friendly way than almost anything that they have done in a long time.
Yeah.
It really builds on the lore and I think brings you into a relatable version of the sort of human war, I think, experience that Star Wars takes place in, instead of the sort of wizard experience of the Jedis, which is cool. Like, Jedis are great, but like feeling grounded to people who have struggles, who are like, they can't just wizard their way out of it with the Force, and what it's like in this oppressive regime that has taken over the galaxy. Really cool. Look at it. And I also haven't finished it yet, but I've been so intrigued. I'm like, I almost think they couldn't ruin it at this point.
It would have to take a real sharp turn to ruin it, but it's beautiful.
Awesome. Thank you for that recommendation. Well, if you like what we have done here today and you'd like to support us, as I said, you can check out our merch store. We have all kinds of things for sale: buttons, hats, shirts, sweaters, beanies, stickers, you name it. It's probably there. Not rulers yet or crayons, but maybe in the future.
One day.
One day. You could also join us on Patreon. You get access to all these super benefits, including videos of us recording our notes, which have pictures and comments to each other and that sort of thing. That's kind of fun. And the people who have already taken that leap, these wonderful supporters who make our lives worth doing, includes Amanda, Brad, the Daily BA, Joshua, Justin, Justine, Kelly, Kim, Kostia, Layla, Megan, Mike M, Mike T, Shauna, and Stephanie. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. And I could not do this without my team of people. Thank you, Jess, who specifically put together the notes for this one today. Thank you also to Patrick, to Alan, to Justin, who does the amazing work. You heard in him cutting together the crazy amount of work that took to make this episode happen. And of course, Shane, thank you so much for jumping on to record with me on this rare Monday night recording sesh.
Yeah, we like to spice things up every now and again.
If you would like to tell us about a yogurt or a show that you're enjoying, or if you have some thoughts about ketamine, its use, or its advocacy for or against it, we'd be interested in hearing from you. You can reach us directly at info@wwd.podcast.com or on the other social media platforms. And otherwise, I think that's all I have until you hear from us next Wednesday. Anything else that I missed, Shane?
Nothing from me.
All right. Thank you for listening. This is Abraham.
And this is Shane.
We're out.
See ya.
You've been listening to Why We Do What We Do. You can learn more about this and other episodes by going to www.wwdpodcast.com. Thanks for listening, and we hope you have an awesome day.